Hey guys, it's Greg Veman here, and this is week 30 of our Bible study. This week we have the End Times Prophecy and the Old Testament Part 2. If you watched last week, we did Part 1, and we looked at the Old Testament prophecies. We analyzed the Day of the Lord prophecies and saw that they were all currently Muslim nations around Israel. We looked at the prophecies of Daniel, and we saw how just the geography and the context of the dream from Daniel 2, 7, and 8 also points towards Muslim nations being involved. And we looked at several other things in Revelation and how they correlate. And when we kind of put it all together, we came to the conclusion that, hey, this has to be considered as a viable option. The four pillars of the Roman theory really kind of began to fall apart. And we're just going to continue our investigation tonight. We want the truth. We want to be a Berean. We don't want to be married to a certain doctrine or a theory that we were taught. We want the truth. And again, what I'm going to show you tonight, I'm not saying that this is right. I'm saying this has a lot of strong biblical and even extra biblical support, and we need to look at it. We need to have this in our mind. We need to have this on our radar, because I'm going to show you some things tonight that are going to blow your mind and are like, whoa. So let's get started. So Old Testament end times prophecy. Now, I should have said this last week, but a lot of this work has been done by a guy named Walid Shuibat and especially Joel Richardson. You can see Joel's 4 books here. I encourage you to read them if you want more information. They are very good. They are very biblical. There are many other people, like I mentioned, who are on board with this and who have done work on it. And Joel did not come up with all this on his own. People have talked about the Islamic Caliphate for well over 100 years. It just fell out of favor when this Roman theory came into vogue in the 80s, 90s. So everything I'm pretty much telling you, nothing is something that I've come up with on my own. I've studied it. I've looked at the scriptures. I've been a Berean and found it to be warranting at least my consideration. So there's your extra references there. So we're going to start off just talking about some Muslim theology and history so that we have an understanding here. And just, you got to understand the basics of the Muslim faith. Let me just run through a few very basic things for you. Number one, the Muslims claim that Allah, who is the true God, revealed himself to Abraham, the same Abraham that the Christians would claim. They claim that it was Allah who revealed himself to Abraham. And then Abraham and his son Ishmael, not Isaac, built the first place of worship for God, or the original house of God. And this is called the Kaaba, that the Muslims still worship today. It was a rectangular structure known as the Kaaba. Here's a picture of it up here on the left. And the black stone is believed to have been given to Abraham by the angel Gabriel. There's a black stone, here you can see it here on the right, that is embedded on the eastern wall of this thing. We'll get more to that later. And it was originally given to Adam and Eve when it fell from the sky to give them a sign as a sign to worship heaven. That's what they believe. That's what they teach. Abraham put the stone in the side of the Kaaba. It's there to this day. And then this religion was around, and it got perverted, and it got from monotheism into polytheism. And finally, in the year 630 AD, Allah decided that Muhammad would be the final prophet, and he revealed himself to him. He cleansed the Kaaba of idols and restored the monotheism of Abraham after Allah called him to reform the world from paganism. So that's how they claim that it all got started and what it's about. And currently, the Kaaba is in the city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and Muslims all over the world face its direction 3 times per day to pray. So that's kind of where they are. You'll need this background information for what we're going to look at. Now, so if this is true, and just consider the fact that, isn't it interesting that a potential candidate for the Antichrist religion makes biblical claims of its roots? So if this is true to some degree, that this religion of Islam goes way back, that they're just not inventing this out of thin air, then is there any evidence of it in the Bible? Well, there might be. If we look here in Judges 8, and I'm not going to read all this to you. This is where Gideon has conquered a large army, and they are kind of taking the spoil from the fallen soldiers from the enemy army. And if you look, I have it highlighted for you here. It says, and he took the crescent ornaments that were on the camels' necks. It says, now the weight of gold down here, earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescent ornaments, pendants, and purple robes which were on the kings of Midian. Midian, just so you know, is an area that is down in Saudi Arabia. That's their original kingdom of where they were. They kind of moved around different places in the Bible. That's where Moses was when he came out. Remember, he came from Midian, down near the Red Sea. That will be important later. So whatever these guys' religion was, the crescent ornament was their sign. And I'll show you some archaeology of that. And if you look at the Hebrew word here, this is from various Hebrew dictionaries and lexicons. We have, here's the Hebrew word here, and it's called Saharoim. And it means little moons or crescent, or basically means moon. That's why we have the word crescent today. And so here it's interesting that, Gideon's a type of Messiah, right? He's saving people from the enemy, and he's stripping the crescent ornaments off the kings in his victory. And the crescent moon, guys, is the symbol of Islam to this day. So, this would fit in the sense that when Jesus comes back, he will be kind of, if this theory is correct, would be kind of defeating the kings of the crescent moons and stripping them off of them in victory, right? There it is. You have the crescent moon, and there's a star, and we're going to talk about the star here in a second as well. And you can see on the top of their temples to this day, they have the crescent moon. Now, let's talk about the crescents in Satan, because Satan is ultimately right in power, and he's the one behind the Antichrist and empowering him. So again, we have the word here for crescent, Saharoim, that we found in Judges describing Gideon. And remember in Isaiah 14, there's a description of the fall of Lucifer. It starts off with the king of Babylon, and it switches to Lucifer, and it says, how fallen you are from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. And what we have here is we have the English, we have the Hebrew, and then we have kind of a transliteration of the words with their numbers so you can look them up. And what's interesting about this, look what it says about Lucifer, O son of the morning. See that word there, Sahar. And I got it blown up for you here. Here's the word, Sahar. And that is the same root for crescent, isn't it? Sahar. And what's interesting is where this verse occurs here in Isaiah. If you go a little further down, this is actually an end times verse where, again, the Lord is talking that I will break the Assyrian in my land and on my mountains. Right? This is the purpose that is purposed against the whole earth. This is the hand that is stretched out over all the nations, for the Lord has purposed it, and who will know it? His hand is stretched out, and who will turn it back? So we have an interesting correlation here between Satan and crescents and the Antichrist. And even more interesting, if we look at Isaiah 14:12, the same verse here, we'll focus in on this part. It says, how you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. Right? And here's the Kaaba stone. Now, the Kaaba stone, remember, is a fallen star, a meteorite, or an asteroid, or something that they claim that fell from the sky, from the heavens. And Lucifer, his name means shining one or morning star. So you can kind of reword this now that we know what we learned from the previous slide, how you are fallen from heaven, O shining star or morning star, son of the crescent moon. So now you have Satan linked to not only a star, and a crescent moon, don't you? And isn't that the exact flag and symbol that we have today? And you have to begin to ask yourself, I mean, is this just a coincidence or not, when we know, as we reviewed last week, that the Muslim religion is the biggest anti-Christ, anti-Yahweh religion out there. Billions of people, and their motto is that there is no sun and there's only one God. And even further, if we look in Revelation 12, this is the verse that talks about how Satan fell from heaven. Look what it says there, highlighted in verse 4. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. These are talking about the fallen angels. So we know that stars can be with fallen angels. And Satan himself is the fallen angel. And here he is, in empowering certainly the religion of Islam. Whether it's the end times one or not, we don't know. But it certainly is interesting, isn't it, how we have the star and the crescent, even in the description of him, which perfectly matches their symbol today. And if we look at further into Islam and fallen stars, the Lord warns in Deuteronomy. He says, take heed lest you lift your eyes to heaven, and when you see the sun, the moon, the stars, and all the host of heaven, you feel driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord your God has given to all the peoples under the whole heaven as a heritage. He was giving this, remember, to Israel as they were about to enter the promised land, because he knew that they were already doing this, the Canaanites in the land. They were worshiping the stars, the moon, and the host of heaven. And we have that going on today. But here's another verse that's very interesting in Acts. Look what it says here. Then God turned and gave them up to worship the host of heaven, as is written in the book of the prophets. This is where Stephen is recounting the history of Israel. And he's talking about, this time frame here. Did you offer me slaughtered animals and sacrifices during 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? Look at this. You also took up the tabernacle of Moloch, that one of their gods, and the star of your god Rethan, images which you made to worship, and I will carry you away of Babylon. So all that we know is that they were worshiping this god Moloch, and they had some kind of tabernacle or house to worship him in, and they were also worshiping a star. And isn't that interesting, since we just learned at the very beginning that the origin of the Muslim religion goes back to somebody having a tabernacle with a star related to it that they were worshiping and claiming is, having to do with their gods. And so here we have, again, more evidence of crescents and tabernacles and stars that all parallel the Muslim religion exactly. And again, here is the tabernacle of the Muslims today, the Kaaba, and there's the star, which is in the eastern corner. And we'll go into that a little bit more. We have some decent evidence that Baal and Molech and some of these gods, they were all kind of, in a conglomerate, but that Baal is Allah, the moon god, that Baal was the moon god. And there's a lot of archaeology. I can't go into this as a whole talk in and of itself, but there's lots of archaeology going way back where you see, again, the crescent moon and the star way, way back, guys, into the Bible times of Israel, the Old Testament times. There's just one picture of it there. And look what Zephaniah says. I will attack Judah, and all who live in Jerusalem will remove from this place every trace of Baal worship, as well as every remnant of the pagan priests. I will remove those who worship the stars in the sky from the rooftops who swear allegiance. So they were worshiping the moon and the stars, and one of the gods, Baal, was kind of this star moon god. Is it a coincidence? I don't know, but it's a little suspicious, isn't it? And even today here, you can see, they're worshiping the same thing, the star and the crescent moon. I mean, look at that. Go back, right? There it is from the Old Testament times, and here they are today doing the same exact thing. Interesting. So keep that in mind now. Now what I'm going to show you is what's called Islamic end times theology. Islamic end times theology, believe it or not, they have their own end times theology. It's called Qiyamah, I'm not very good at pronouncing Arabic terms, but there's a book. You can get this on Amazon. You can read it yourself if you don't believe the things I'm going to tell you. Major Signs Before the Day of Judgment. Here's the author. I have this book. I'm going to show you pictures from it. And basically, there's 9 things that we're going to look at. They have someone called the Mahdi, who's their Messiah. They have someone called the Jahal, who would be their kind of anti-Messiah. They have the return of the prophet Jesus. I'll explain that to you. They have Gog and Magog. They have some crazy signs and things that happen with landslides and smoke and the rising of the sun from the west. They have something called the beast, and they have a great fire. And what you're going to see here, what I'm going to show you, is that their end times theology exactly parallels the Bible, except it's the exact opposite. And it's crazy how detailed and how parallel it is, except it's flipped on its head. It's the exact opposite. So let me take you through it here. So the first thing that they have is this person called the Imam or the Mahdi. And here is I'm just taking a picture right out of the book. I'm going to read it to you. These are the signs that precede this coming of their Messiah. Look what it says here, a general sign. There are many signs that will precede him. A general and a very important sign is that he will come at a time when there is great confusion, intense disputes, and violent deaths. When people are afflicted by disturbances and experiencing great fear, calamities will fall upon the people, so much so that man shall not find shelter to shelter him from oppression. There will be many battles and fitnas before his appearance. Every time a fitna has come to an end, another will start, spread, and intensify. The people will be troubled to such an extent that they will long for death. It is then that the Imam will be sent. And doesn't this sound like our tribulation period? It sure does. This Imam or Mahdi, he will fight many wars. The largest will be against the Christians, where many Muslims will be martyred. There will be a temporary peace with the Christians. He will bring in a time of prosperity. He will reign for 7 years and then he dies. He will reign as the Caliph, which is the head of the Muslim Caliphate, a Muslim state under the rule of Muhammad's successor. And then we have his enemy, the Dajjal, which would be kind of the anti-Messiah, or kind of like our Antichrist. And that means liar or deceiver, the Dajjal. He is the Muslim anti-Mahdi, or like the opposite of our Antichrist. He is the false Jewish Messiah and of Jewish descent. He has great miraculous powers. He appears near the very end of Mahdi's reign, at the very end of the 7-year period. 2 witnesses or angels will accompany him. He will claim to be God. He heals blind people and lepers, and the real Muslim prophet Jesus will return and kill him. Now, let me go back to that, because so here you have, in their theology, a guy who's going to appear at the very end of a 7-year period, and he is going to fight against their Muslim leader. He's going to have miraculous powers. He's going to have 2 witnesses that accompany him. He's going to say he's God. He's going to do healings, and he's going to be of Jewish descent. So here you can begin to see that this parallels exactly what the Bible teaches about the end times, because it's Jesus himself that comes at the end of the 7-year period and fights the Antichrist. So they are expecting the same kind of thing. They're just viewing him as bad instead of good. Now, there's also, in their theology, the Muslim Jesus. This is their view of Jesus. Let me take you through this, because this is fascinating. Jesus was a prophet, according to them, sent by Allah to the Jews. And he did not get crucified, die, nor resurrected. That did not happen. He was raised to heaven by Allah himself while he was still alive. He's still alive in heaven, and he's waiting to return before the end to finish his ministry with the Mahdi. He will be, get this, a religious assistant to the Mahdi. The people of the book or the Bible will believe in him when he returns. Not all of them, but some people will. He will destroy the Jews and the Dajjal, the anti-Messiah. He will destroy Gog and Magog. He will end Christianity and make Islam the world religion. And Jesus, the Muslim, this Muslim Jesus, will convert many to Islam as a great evangelist. He will usher in a new time of peace and prosperity until he dies a natural death after 40 years. And they have some millennium-like wording here with the lion and the lamb and children playing with serpents and things. So the Muslim Jesus, they view that their Jesus is going to come back, and he is going to be the religious assistant to the Mahdi. And he will be a great evangelist trying to convert people to Islam. And he's going to tell them, I'm Jesus, but the Christians and the Jews had it wrong. I wasn't God. I didn't die. I wasn't crucified. I was a prophet, but the Muslims have me right. And he's going to do signs and wonders to prove it. And what's interesting about this is that this exactly parallels the false prophet who was the religious assistant to the Antichrist. So you can see so far that their Messiah is our Antichrist, and their Muslim Jesus parallels the role of our false prophet. Then there's this Gog and Magog. They teach that Gog and Magog, which we know are in both Revelation and Ezekiel 38 and 39, were very evil tribes imprisoned by an iron wall by a prophet from the time of Abraham. This is what they teach. The Great Wall of China was built to keep them out. They've been trying to break free ever since. They will emerge in the end times and cause great destruction on the earth. Interesting that that's just part of their theology. Then they have landslides, smoke, and sunrises from the west. And basically, this is a bunch of calamities that are occurring. There's 3 major landslides in the east, west, and Arabia, engulfing things. There's going to smoke covering the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. Only the believers in Allah won't be affected. And they're going to have the sun rise from the opposite side of the earth. Then there is this thing that they call the beast. And I have the chapter here just to show you this in the book on the right here. And I have a little word highlighted here, which is the forehead, and I'll show you why. So they teach that Allah will bring forth a beast near the very end to speak to the people who have not believed in Allah because they would not believe the revelation given to them. And the beast is going to mark the forehead of all believers to distinguish them from non-believers. So if you take the mark, you're a believer and you'll be saved in their theology, and the beast is going to be the one to do this. And we don't know what this beast is. They really don't tell us whether it's some sort of special animal or a person or what it is, but they believe that there is this beast that's going to come and mark the foreheads of the true believers. And so if we look now at the characteristics of our Antichrist from the scriptures, here's the scriptures on the right, the Christian Antichrist. You can see they're coming mainly from Daniel and Revelation, a few things in Ezekiel, but mainly Daniel and Revelation, which we've been talking about. That he's a powerful political and military leader. He's a spiritual leader. He has a false prophet. He's anti-Jewish and Christian. And he has persecutions and wars. He military attacks Israel and Jerusalem. He signs a 7-year peace treaty with Israel. He changes laws and times. He rides in on a white horse. And he has the spirit of Antichrist that denies the Trinity, the incarnation, the Son of God, and the substitutionary death on the cross. And what's interesting, if we go back to this Islam Mahdi or Messiah, he has pretty much everything in this list. Not everything in their books. I have some of the references here, but he fits this to a T. So our concept of Antichrist is their concept of Messiah. The person who appears and starts from the biblical standpoint, who would be the Antichrist to them, will be their Messiah or Mahdi. They're going to see him as completely different than we would if we were there to see it. Now, what are the chances of that? That their Messiah would exactly parallel the Christian Antichrist. I mean, how can that be? And even more interesting, let's look at the false prophet, which we've talked about. We have here the biblical false prophet, and we have here the Islamic Jesus. And again, it's the exact parallel. In the Bible, there's going to be a religious assistant to Antichrist. He's going to be empowered by Satan. He's going to perform miracles. he causes and forces the inhabitants of the earth to worship the Antichrist or die, and all who refuse to worship the image of the beast or the Antichrist are killed by being beheaded. And the Islamic concept of Jesus that comes back is going to fit this bill to the T. So again, you can imagine here in the end times how things can get confusing. Here's another table. You can go back and look at it on your own, but I line up here on the left the biblical concept of Jesus, of who he is and what he will do at the in the end times. And then I have the Islamic Jesus, and then I have over here the Antichrist. And basically the interesting thing is the Islamic Antichrist, the Dajjal. And so the Islamic concept of their anti-Messiah is the biblical Jesus. And the Islamic Jesus is our concept in the Bible of the false prophet. Very interesting. So this is just a table that kind of sums it all up for you, right? In the Bible, Jesus Christ is the Messiah. He doesn't have an assistant. The Antichrist would be the Muslim Mahdi. The false prophet would be the Muslim Jesus, an imposter Jesus, someone who's saying he's Jesus, but he's not, right? And in the Islamic concept, they're going to have this Mahdi come as their Messiah. He's going to be our Antichrist, right? Then he's going to have this assistant claiming to be the real Jesus, a religious leader doing signs and wonders. That's going to be our false prophet. And then they have their Antichrist. That's going to be Jesus when he comes back at the very end. So you can see how, if this theory is true, how confusing it will be for the world, right? We have, from our standpoint as Christians, imagine you're on the earth, you miss the rapture, but you get saved. Here comes Antichrist onto the scene, right? He comes in riding on a white horse, right? You're looking for a false prophet. And you know that the real Jesus is going to come back at the end, right? But in the Muslims who were alive on the earth, right? This guy who comes on, they're going to say, hey, our Messiah, our Mahdi's here. And they're going to say that, hey, that Jesus is back. The real Jesus is back. He's going to prove it by signs and wonders. And then when the real Jesus comes back to fight against them, they're going to say, hey, the Dajjal has appeared, right? He's their Antichrist. So if you're on the earth and you're trying to figure out what's going on, and there's a guy who's saying he's Jesus, and I am the answer, and I want you to become a Muslim. The Christians had it wrong, and he's doing signs and wonders. You'd know, well, hey, the Christians told me that Jesus would come back, but maybe they had it wrong. You might fall for this thing very easily, because look at this. Here's the false prophet, right? He's the Islamic Jesus, if this theory is correct. Look what Jesus said when he was on the Mount of Olives giving his famous speech here. Look here in verse 24. For false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. Therefore, if they say to you, look, he is in the desert, do not go out. Oh, isn't that interesting that he chose, if he's going to talk about a false Jesus, that he would be in the desert. Right? And we know that a lot of the Muslim areas are deserts. And this is what he would say. I am Jesus Christ. I am a Muslim. Allah is the true God. I am not God. The Christians lied and were wrong. See my power as proof. Come worship Allah, the true and living God. If you want to survive this time of tribulation, you must come to Allah. You must take the mark. Something like that. And how confusing would that be for you? Here's the guy who's saying he's Jesus. He's got signs and wonders to prove it. And the world's in chaos. And you think, well, gosh, maybe the Christians were close, but they had it wrong. You could easily be deceived by this. It will be very, very confusing. So that's the end of the discussion on the Muslim end times theology. And I just find it remarkably coincidental that theirs could be that parallel to ours, but yet kind of flipped on its head. I mean, what are the chances of that? How and why does that exist if this has nothing to do with the end times and it's all about a European world ruler and all this kind of stuff? I don't know, but it's more than fishy to me. Let's keep going. Now let's look at this mystery Babylon the Great from Revelation. So there is this entity in Revelation called Mystery Babylon the great whore who rides the beast. And I'll show you and read all this to you. So we're trying to identify who is this person, where do they come from. Now there are multiple references to this in the Old Testament. Look here in Isaiah 21. I have it highlighted for you in yellow. A prophecy against the wilderness or desert by the sea. We know that this pertains to Revelation Babylon because of this quote right here. Babylon has fallen. That is verbatim in Revelation. Right? Here's Revelation 18. After these things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen. And in Revelation 17, right, it says, so he carried me away in the spirit into the desert in the wilderness. Right? And if I go back, right, a prophecy against the wilderness or desert by the sea, Babylon is fallen, is fallen. So we know that Isaiah 21 is talking about the end times and the Revelation Babylon, because Revelation Babylon verses in Revelation 17 and 18 quote it verbatim and they match up perfectly. So that will be important for us to go forward here. So let's read Revelation 17 and 18. We're going to read the whole thing. Be patient, stay with it, because if we're going to talk about it, we need to have it in our mind clear. Revelation 17, then one of the seven angels who had seven bowls came and talked to me, saying, come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, or desert, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Remember that beast, we've said, is the Antichrist's empire, that final conglomeration of nations that summarized all the ones from before that had to at least include, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and the Greek Empire. So then there is another woman, this harlot, who is riding the beast. She is working in conjunction with the beast in the end times, that Antichrist empire, which we looked at last week. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the filthiest of her fornication. And on her forehead a name was written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of abominations of the earth. I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus, and when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. I have right here underlined the mother of harlots. That means like she's kind of the greatest of all harlots and abominations. She's like, how we say the mother of all, which means like the greatest, the biggest, the most significant of all. Whoever or whatever this is, it is the biggest one of them all. Verse 7, but the angel said to me, why did you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that you saw was and is not, and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time. The beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th and is of the 7th and is going to perdition. Now, we looked at these verses, remember, last week, and we saw how we could identify the final empire by kind of counting through them. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they will receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. These are of one mind. They will give their power and authority to the beast. These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. So this Antichrist empire is going to fight against Jesus and his people. Then he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind, and to give the kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. So this beast is actually going to turn on this harlot, this woman, and just try and destroy her. And the woman who you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. This is the key verse here. It's telling us that the woman is a city, a great city. The word great means a very powerful and influential city which reigns over the kings of the earth. This is going to be a city that has worldwide influence. Revelation 18, now this Babylon is going to fall. This city is going to fall. After these things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, is fallen. Remember, that's the quote from Isaiah 21. And it's become a dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. For all the nations have drunk the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, unless you receive her plagues. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Remember to her just as she rendered to you, and repay her double according to her works in the cup which she has mixed. Mix double for her. In the measure that she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, and the same measure given her torment and sorrow. For she says in her heart, I sit as queen, and I am no widow, and will not see sorrow. Therefore her plagues will come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judges her. Verse 9, the kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived luxurious with her will weep and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment is come. And the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise any more. Merchandise of gold and silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen and purple, silk and scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object, ivory, every kind of most precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble, and cinnamon and incense, fragrant oil and frankincense, wine and oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots, and bodies and souls of men. The fruit that your soul longed for has gone from you, and all the things which are rich and splendid have gone from you, and you shall find them no more at all. The merchants of these things who became rich by her will stand at a distance for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, for in 1 hour such great riches came to nothing. Look at this. Every shipmaster, all who travel by ship, sailors, and as many as trade on the sea, stood at a distance and cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What is like this great city? So wherever this city is, we're going to talk about this. It's got to be visible from somewhere on the sea. They threw dust on their heads and cried out, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, that great city in which all who had ships on the sea became rich by her wealth. For in 1 hour she is made desolate. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. We're almost done. Revelation 18:21. Then a mighty angel took up a stone, a great millstone, and threw it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down, and shall not be found any more. The sounds of harpists, musicians, flutists, and trumpeters shall not be heard any more. No craftsman or any craft shall be found in you any more, and the sound of a millstone shall not be heard in you any more. The light of a lamp shall not shine in you any more, and the voice of a bridegroom, the bride, shall not be heard in you any more. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, for by your sorcery all the nations were deceived, and in her was found the blood of the prophets and saints and all who were slain on the earth. So let's go back now and look, what are the characteristics of Mystery Babylon? We have 2 chapters here with a lot of information, and we can build a list of the characteristics that are given to us in the scriptures and see if we can make anything fit. So let's go back here and look. Well, the first thing is that Mystery Babylon is a great literal city, right? It's an actual city that has great worldwide influence. It tells us the woman that you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. City is mentioned 6 more times, so it keeps saying that city, that city, that city. So it's clear that it's a city. God isn't trying to confuse us and use allegorical language or anything. I think he's telling us, trying to beat it into our heads, that this is a city, a very powerful and influential city, very well known, right? And we know that it's a consumer or an importer city, because look what it says: the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise anymore. And when you look at the list, they have luxury items, building materials, food, transportation, laborer, and others. And this isn't a spiritual list. They don't have, it seems, many natural resources. They're having to buy everything, and that's why the kings of the earth are upset. This is a city that relies on purchasing everything to make themselves go. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. It's a desert city. Remember, we saw that twice. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness or the desert. So John was carried away into the desert. This city was in the desert. And look, Isaiah 21 matches up perfectly. The burden against the wilderness, the desert of the sea. And that's where it says again, Babylon has fallen, how we know. So it's a desert city. And it's a desert port city near the sea, right? Because remember it said, for in 1 hour such great riches came to nothing. Every shipmaster, all who travel by ship, sailor, and as many as trade on the sea, stood at a distance and cried out when they saw the smoke. So wherever this city is, it has to be close enough to a shoreline and in the desert that if you're on a ship, you could look and see the smoke of its burning. It's a religiously influential city. Look what it says. And on her forehead a name was written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of abominations on the earth. Spiritual harlotry is idolatry and false gods, right? We've talked about this. It's like spiritual adultery, harlotry. Mystery Babylon is the greatest of all false religions. It is going to be the center. It is going to be the empowering place for a religious system that is false, and it has worldwide influence. And we know that this woman, this Mystery Babylon, this city wants to kill all Christians just like the Antichrist. Look what it says. Remember in verse 6, I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. So this city wants to kill Christians. And she rides the beast, which is the kingdom of Antichrist. It's a temporary partnership that will end when the beast turns on the woman. We'll talk about that. It's religiously influential city, right? She says, I sit as queen and I am no widow and I will not see sorrow. And this is quoted from Isaiah 47. And this chapter 47 talks all about Babylon. I have it highlighted for you here where she says that, I am. It's a city of slavery, right? Cargoes of horses and chariots and slaves and human lives. So they have a lot of slaves there, right? It's well known for slavery and importing human lives. Something seems to be out of the ordinary in this, just in the wording. Maybe human trafficking, we don't know, or forced slave labor. It's an extravagantly wealthy city of royalty, right? It says that she was arrayed in purple and scarlet and gold and precious stones and pearls, and on it goes. So it's a very wealthy city. It's a city of great economic influence and seduction, right? Because it says, look here in yellow, the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Again, in chapter 18, the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and with the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. So whatever this city is, it's got to have a lot of power. Economic influence leads to spiritual influence, joining her in spiritual corruption and bloodshed. This city is going to be suddenly and permanently destroyed, right? There it is in yellow. In 1 hour, she has been brought to ruin. We're just going back over 17 and 18, which we reviewed together and picking out the points. So in summary, it's a literal city. It's a great city. It's a desert city. It's a port or coastal city. It's a consumer city. It's the greatest city of idolatry on the earth. It's a religious capital with global influence. It's a city of extreme wealth and excess and royalty. It's a city of slavery. It's a city that promotes the murder of Jews and Christians. It's the capital of the final satanic kingdom. Now, different views through time is that it's Rome, the Roman Catholic Church, New York City, USA. Now, none of these are in a desert. They are near the sea somewhat. They are close enough, both of them, New York and Rome, but they're not in the desert. They don't fit a lot of the other characteristics. Modern apostate Jerusalem, literal Babylon, that could be considered kind of in a desert, but it doesn't fit the sea. Apostate Christianity. I mean, these some of these theories aren't actual cities. These people haven't really read it carefully. The Illuminati, again, not a city. And then there's Mecca or Saudi Arabia. So, again, not saying that this is it, but with all the other evidence that we've seen for the Muslim religion and kingdom being part of an end time scenario, being very compelling, all the way from last week's lecture and then what we just saw now. Does this city of Mecca or Saudi Arabia fit the bill? And what are the odds that yet another part of this theory fits like a glove with the Bible if it turns out, and it's going to? And so you have to see these multiple things are converging. So let's look at this. Mystery Babylon the Great can almost certainly be proven to be in Arabia, right? Look what it says here in Isaiah 21. A prophecy against the wilderness or desert by the sea. Babylon has fallen, has fallen. We've shown you how that clearly quotes from Revelation 17 and 18 twice, so we know that we're accurate there in our Bible interpretation. There it is in Revelation 17. There it is in 18. So we know that we can look at Isaiah 21 and get good information from the Old Testament. This is where, remember that Revelation is about 60 or 70% Old Testament. The whole darn thing is a compilation of the Old Testament. That's why we're talking about it tonight, to show you guys this stuff. So here's Isaiah 21, right? I have the relevant things highlighted for you. Here's Babylon is fallen, is fallen. Here's the wilderness of the sea. And so when it's talking about this, look at the different cities that are highlighted. Elam, Seir, Arabia, Dedan, Kedar, Duma, Arabia, Tema. So these cities are going to tell you the general location of where this Revelation Babylon is, because these are the ones mentioned. So what we can do is we can go to Google Earth, we can plot them. We know approximately where they were. There's Teman, there's Hazor, there's Kedar, there's Dedan, there's Seir, there's Duma. So this will give you the general vicinity of where this is. And so when you look here, lo and behold, it's in Saudi Arabia. It is in certainly what will be considered mostly desert. We have the sea here nearby, right? Because it says it's a desert by the sea. Isaiah 21:1. And then if we add in here Jeremiah 49 says, the earth shakes at the noise of their fall, and its cry of its noise is heard at the Red Sea. Jeremiah 41 is another section of Scripture which talks about Revelation Babylon. And so it talks about the fall of Babylon, and it says that the cry, when this city, wherever it is, falls, can be heard at the Red Sea. So here's the Red Sea, right? And isn't it interesting that Mecca is right there? You have Mecca by the Red Sea in a desert, and in Arabia, where Isaiah 21 and 49 place it. And it's also close enough where if it was on fire, you would be able to see it from here and mourning. Well, and there's actually, as I'm going to show you in a little bit, a port city right here for all of their trade. And remember, this is the verse, again, that I showed you from Matthew 25, where Jesus warned that the false person impersonating him would say, look, he is in the desert. This is Isaiah 13, And this is another one. See it here, it is. The burden against Babylon. It's talking about the day of the Lord. For the stars of heaven and the constellations will not give their light. The sun will be darkened, and the moon will not cause its light to shine. So again, when we look at this, Isaiah 13, we know that it's talking about the end times Babylon. From all these clues here, I'm only showing you some of them. Look what it says here down in verse 20. It will never be inhabited, nor will it be settled from generation to generation. Look what it says here. Nor will the Arabian pitch tents there. But the wild beasts of the earth will lie there, and their houses will be full of owls, ostriches, and dwell there, and wild goats and caper there. Again, this is some of the language right out of Revelation 18 when it talked about the fall of Babylon. But what Isaiah 13 gives you is that the Arabians will no longer pitch their tents there. And that, again, fits perfectly with everything that we've seen, doesn't it? So we can say, potentially, that Mystery Babylon is in Arabia. We have Isaiah 13, the burden against Babylon, talking about the day of the Lord. And we have here what I just showed you, nor will the Arabian pitch tents here. Here's Isaiah 34. Here's another one. Now look at this one. It's talking about the final Babylon. Its streams shall be turned into pitch, its dust into brimstone, its land shall become burning pitch. It shall not be quenched night nor day, its smoke shall ascend forever. From generation to generation it shall lie waste, no one shall pass through it forever and ever. Again, this is right out of Revelation. Let me show it to you. Here it is on the right. And remember 18, we read these verses. We're just going back and looking at them. Verse 18 of Revelation 18, and cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what is like this great city? And then in Revelation 19, alleluia, her smoke rises up ever and forever and ever. And then in 1821, thus with violence the great city shall be thrown down and shall not be found anymore. So you can see I have them highlighted as they correlated. Isaiah 34 says no one shall pass through it forever and ever. Revelation 18 says it's not going to be found anymore. This says that its smoke shall ascend forever. Her smoke rises up forever, forever. And it says that it's on burning, that it shall become burning pitch. And Revelation 18 says the smoke of her burning. So you can see it's a direct quotation, but what you learn from Isaiah 34 is that it's burning pitch. What is pitch? Pitch, we know, is oil, right? And this prophecy here is about the area of Edom, and Edom includes western Saudi Arabia. And the prophecy quoted in Revelation 18 and 19 demonstrates that Babylon is also in Arabia because of Edom and because of burning pitch. What is pitch? Pitch is oil, and if pitch is set on fire, this is from the Iraqi wars where some of these oil fields were set on fire, and it sometimes is unstoppable. And you can see what happens when you set an oil field on fire. And here is some aerial footage of some of these things. You can see it from the satellites. Look at that black smoke from above. So that fits perfectly too, that you could have burning pitch, burning oil fields, and smoke rising forever and ever. These things will burn for a long, long time. So we look at our map again here. We have Mecca down here on the Red Sea. In the desert, lots of oil. And how about this? Babylon the Great's wine. Look what it says here in Jeremiah 51. Babylon was a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunk. The nations drank her wine. Therefore, the nations are deranged. And in Revelation 17 and 18, it says the same thing, doesn't it? The inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Revelation 18:3, for all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Right? So this wine, whatever it is, has worldwide influence. This wine has economic and spiritual impact. Could it be Islam and oil? Certainly sounds like it could be. Now, remember we said that the beast is going to destroy the harlot, right? It says in verse 16 of Revelation 17, and the 10 horns which you saw in the beast, These will hate the harlot, this woman that we're looking at, this city, make her desolate, naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. There we have the idea of it being set on fire again, the smoke of her burning, but it's going to be the beast that does it. And you say, well, how could that be? Would the Muslims really attack Mecca or Europeans Rome? Right? Mecca has been attacked by Muslims many times over the past 1400 years. And an Islamic end times prophecy predicts the Mahdi will reign from Jerusalem because Mecca will have been destroyed. That's in their own prophecies. And Saudi Arabia, believe it or not, is hated by a lot of the Muslim world because of their alliance with the USA, and we're called the Great Satan, because of their extreme wealth, because of their religious hypocrisy, because remember that the Iran and many of these other nations are Shiite, whereas the Saudis are Sunnis, and that's that idea of the iron mixed with the clay, that the kingdom is partly strong, partly fragile. And Turkey is rising in power and used to control the entire region, and it wants it back. And there's one more clue about the beast, right? That we have here, that they were beheaded for their witness to Jesus and for the word of God, and had not worshipped the beast or his image. And we talked about this last week, but which current world religion is known for beheading people that reject their authority? We know that this is an actual kind of gruesome picture here. Sorry about that, from ISIS that just did this. So we know that everything fits there, beheading people. So what about Mecca? Does Mecca fit the bill? It certainly does from everything that we've seen so far. If we look where it is, there it is. It's on the sea. It's in a desert. Interestingly, too, it is in the same region of real estate. This is where Moses crossed the Red Sea and set up the original temple of God. Isn't it interesting that if this theory is true, that Satan would choose to make his center very close to where it all got started with Moses on Mount Sinai? This isn't that far. Isn't it interesting that it's in the same vicinity there? There's the port city of Jeddah, which is right there next to Mecca here. And there's a train that takes you there. And here's some pictures of Mecca. This is a very huge and big city. You can see that it is the center of Islamic worship. There's the Kaaba in the center there. They are building this thing to be like a vertical city. I think this thing may be done now. It's 3.5 billion is the cost, because 2 million pilgrims visit the city each year. 20 million people visit the city annually. Just 2 million pilgrims come at the time of their Ramadan, and they're building this huge, super luxuriant hotel there. I don't know how many people it can hold. There's 12 towers, 1.4 million square feet, 10,000 rooms, 70 restaurants in this building. Certainly in terms of all the descriptions of Revelation Babylon, the luxury, the gold, it is a very luxurious city filled with all kinds of wealth. Every day, 1.7 billion people bow 3 times a day and pray towards this city and this structure, the Kaaba. You see, I think sometimes, we're caught up in our Eastern country. We're just not thinking about this. We're not aware that this is really going on. We are, but we're not. And so if you're looking for something to be the center of an antichrist theology that is the greatest center of idolatry ever on the planet Earth, this, guys, fits the bill. Billions of people every day praying towards a structure, a physical thing, which is an idol and a stone, 2 idols there, right? That is specifically in its theology anti-God and anti-Christ. And so every day and then once a year for a period, they all descend upon this city and worship this thing. And you can see they spiral and dance around it. You can see them all there around this thing. So this is potentially the greatest idolatrous religion and city in the world because of this structure, because of these people, because of this city. There's a picture of the Kaaba, and there's the stone which is the fallen meteorite, the fallen star there on the side, and they actually will come up and they will kiss this stone, and they will circle and dance around this building, the Kaaba, thinking that it came from Abraham. And there's a lot of information on this. You can go back and look at these slides about the facts of this. It's interesting. All this stuff here is just stuff that I've told you already about that they think that Abraham and Ishmael built it, and they believed it's more than 1,000 years older than Solomon's temple, again, going all the way back to the very beginning. And we saw some hints that maybe there was a structure related to the origins of the Muslims in the times of Gideon and from that verse from Zephaniah. They do have some representations of what it's like inside, that there's some columns, there's a place of little worship or an altar here. There's some kind of door or other thing here. There's some things on the walls. This is what it looks like on the inside of this Kaaba structure. And here's just another version of that. You can see the door here. There's the black stone. That's the way in. This is what it looks like on the outside. And here they are, at their holy time, where again millions of people descend upon this city, and they all try and get up here to kiss this thing and touch it, and they go around in a spiral worshiping this as the house of God. And it is absolutely amazing to watch it happen. And remember that 1 John 2:2 says he is Antichrist who denies the Father and the Son. This is the religion that does that. This says around the Dome of the Rock itself, God is one. He has no son and is not begotten. A direct blow to Christianity. And again, this Baal, and Allah seem to go all the way back to worship of the moon god with a star, all the way back to the time of the Old Testament. You can see there's multiple things. And what Muhammad did was he just took the moon god that was in existence and said, oh, this is now the one God. That's essentially what he did. Now, let's finish up with a discussion of the mark of the beast. This is very interesting. And this is really interesting. I don't know if it's true. I'm not saying that it's true. But again, when you look at it in light of everything that I've told you, everything that we've looked at about how all the nations that fight against the Lord in the times of the end are the Muslim nations today that surround Israel. And then you look at Daniel, and you look at the things that we saw about the Muslim religion, and that there's going to be some kind of mark, and all these things that parallel the Bible. What I'm about to show you here is so coincidental and so close that you have to ask yourself, what are the chances that this could just be there? Now, if it was just this and nothing else fit, it probably wouldn't be worth spending much time looking at, because it would just be like, okay, well, there's that, but nothing else fits. But when almost everything else fits, and everything seems to be pointing that the Muslims have to have a key role in whatever happens in the end times, they have to. The Bible's telling us they do. Then what I'm going to show you now is you're going to be like, whoa, because in light of all the other evidence, it magnifies the chances. That what are the chances of what I'm going to show you is what you got to ask yourself, that this matches what I'm going to show you. So let's get started here. Hold on. This is something everyone likes to talk about, right? 666. What does it mean? There's been all kinds of effort trying to figure out what it is. Let's start by reading the verse. Revelation 13, verses 16 to 18. Here it is. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand, on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except the one who has the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. So it's telling you that the mark is the name and the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. And this is the way all of our Christian Bibles typically read, right? This is what it says. This is why we're trying to figure out what does 666 mean. Well, let's dig a little deeper here. And that the name of the beast can be, or is possibly that it is a creed. Let me show you why. The word name there in the Greek does not always indicate a literal name. In biblical times, someone's name indicated their character, their nature, and their mission. Let's look at some examples here. Look at Jesus himself. He was clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. Well, that's not his name, is it? But they're saying that's his name because it describes his character, his nature, and his mission, and something about him. And look at verse 16. And on his robe and on his thigh, a name was written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Now, that's not his actual name, but it describes his mission, his character, and his nature, doesn't it? He's King of Kings, he's Lord of Lords. So that's calling it his name. So it doesn't have to be a literal name of a person, does it? It could be a creed. It could be a description of their character. And look, even in Matthew 1:21, behold, the virgin shall be with child and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, God with us. Is that his actual literal name? No, it is not. But it again is another descriptor of who he is and what he's about. Right? So the name, therefore, is a creed or an article of faith if Antichrist is going to mimic Jesus Christ, right? Remember that the Antichrist is going to mimic Jesus Christ. He's going to try and be an imposter. He's going to become as an angel of light, right? So he's going to do a lot of the things that Jesus does, right? Jesus is the Word. He is God with us. He is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So these are if you put all these together, this is kind of a statement of faith, isn't it? Jesus is the Word. He's God with us. He's King of Kings, Lord of Lords. It's a statement of faith. It's a creed or an article of faith about Jesus. These names that the Bible gives us, right? This is the same word we're looking at. So when Revelation 13, talking about the name of the beast, says that he has a name, it likely is going to be something like Jesus's names that he is given, and it's going to be in some kind of article of faith or something about the person or whatever they're representing, not necessarily Bob or Tom, Dick or Harry or something like that. So there it is. From Jesus's names himself, we can know what we're maybe looking for, right? And we know that is going to be the name of blasphemy, right? Revelation 13:1 tells us, look what it says. Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. So the name, whatever it is going to be a blasphemous name, something that denies God and Jesus. The name of the beast will contain or imply an antichrist, anti-Yahweh creed or language that will exalt another above the Lord. It's going to be someone who takes God's place. Islam, guys, denies the deity, death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. The Muslim Shahadahan Creed says there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the one sent by Allah, not Jesus. So there is no God but Allah, denying the Father, and Muhammad is the one sent by Allah, denying Jesus. It denies Yahweh as God. It denies Jesus as God and as his final prophet, right there. That's their creed, right? It's also an indicator of allegiance. Look what it says here. Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and his image, and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night who worship the beast in an image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. So if we look at what we just read, anyone who receives the mark is condemned to hell. They're condemned to hell. That's clear, right? This is not something you accidentally embrace or receive. It's not something where, oh, I got a chip in my hand and I didn't know the chip. You're not going to get sent to hell for something like that. Whatever this mark is, it is going to have to be something that is an outward indicator of an inward allegiance or submission to the beast that you must choose to accept. It's got to be an anti-Yahweh and anti-Christ theology, right? Because it's going to condemn you to hell, and it's going to be something that is a blasphemous name that you are putting on your body. That's why it condemns you to hell, because it's blasphemous, because it's anti-God, it's anti-Jesus, it's anti-Yahweh, right? Look what it says here in Revelation 13:17. The mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. So the name and the number must correlate and be anti-Yahweh, anti-Christ. The mark represents the number and the name. That's what it's saying here. The mark. Look what it says. The mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. The mark represents the name and the number, whatever this is. So the Greek word there, charagma, for mark. It's a stamp. It's an imprinted mark, or in John's day, it also meant a badge of servitude for slaves to their masters, some kind of badge with something that showed that they were a slave to their master. That's what that word mark can mean. Now, the most common Muslim creed is called the Bismillah. And there it is right there. That's the symbol in the Arabic for it. And this is read from right to left. That's a language that reads backwards from ours. And it reads, in the name of Allah. Right? The crossed swords is a universal Muslim sign. In the name of Allah, from right to left. And there's the dividing line right there. In the name of Allah. Right? In the name, Allah. And then the Muslim sign there. So this is their most common Muslim creed that they have. This is a sign. This is a symbol, which is all over the place. And I'm going to show you they're even wearing it now on their foreheads, on their wrists. Many people, it's very common. Right? Now, let's look at the Greek numbering system of letters. This idea of 666 comes from, in the Greek, of that verse that talks about, and the number of his name, and his number is 666, that each Greek letter has a numerical equivalent, right? And so we see a chi, 600, right? We see an epsilon, 60, and then we see the C or the F, which is 6. So 666, right? And that's it written out, akaso exakanta x. There it is in Greek, and there it is in the manuscripts from the New Testament of that verse. Now, what I want you to see there is that isn't that very similar, almost identical to what I just showed you, right? Look at that. And then look at that, right? So, and Allah can be written vertically, right? There it is. There's Allah, and it's written vertically, and there it is. That's what we have here. This is the actual word for 666 in the New Testament. So, if we look at the original Greek text, the oldest one, or one of the oldest ones that we have from the Codex Vaticanus, 350 AD. What does it show here for 666? Now here's the whole page. This is the actual photograph from this manuscript. I put a red dot there for you, showing you approximately where it is on the page. You can go look at this online yourself and see what I'm talking about. It's online. Now I'm zooming in here to this area right here. Right? And I'm going to circle it for you. Now, there it is. Now, look at that. That, guys, is exactly, almost exactly, to a T, that Muslim creed symbol, isn't it? Now, there it is blown up. Now, what are the chances of that? And how would this make sense? Well, now, if we look at some other manuscripts of Revelation in this verse. Here's P115 or P Oxy 4499, around 250. This says 616. So simple to see, well, how maybe they made a mistake. This is the oldest copy we have of Revelation 13, and it says 1:6. But again, you can see the markings there. So they weren't, my point is, they weren't spelling out in Greek in the oldest copies that we have 666. There was some kind, there were 3 letters or 3 symbols here. And later someone looked at that and says, well, oh, I'm going to use that gematria system and change it to 666. But the original manuscripts do not say 66. One says 66, one has this, and one has that. And if you do that in Greek numbering game, you get 616. But the original manuscripts here and there don't say 666. You've got to take this and say, okay, that means 600, this means 60, that means 6. Some people would do that, but that is a jump, that is a leap to translate that as 666. There it is there. Now, if we look at one from 450 a little bit later, we can see now they're writing it. Here it is right here. Now they're writing out 666. They're writing it out, right? 666. And Codex Sinaiticus, there it is right there, written out for you. 666. But that's later. And the Codex Alexandrinus, same thing. It's written out. Here's P47, very early, right? There it is. It's not written out. It's just 3 symbols, isn't it? So, if John saw what would be the final Antichrist's badge of servitude, or his mark, or his creed, if John was shown this, and John wrote this down, and he was shown this, which is in the name of Allah, and he wrote this down, and that's what he wrote. Remember, John writes, he is shown this Muslim symbol and copies it in the first original manuscript, right? John is given this, and he writes this down in the first manuscript. And then a scribe comes along and sees this and assumes that it must be Greek. And so he writes this. He translates this to this and assumes it must be Greek and translates it into the Greek symbols, which are almost identical. And so that's when they started off on the 666 thing, right? And then later, the other manuscripts that I showed you, they start writing it out 666. But what you have to ask yourself is, what in the world is at this point in Revelation, talking about this mark, the chances that this looks almost identical to that? What are the odds of that? And isn't it very possible that if John wrote this, that it would be very easy for someone to write, say, well, gosh, I don't know what that is, and he writes it in Greek, because that's always, he's transcribing, everything else is Greek, and that's how we got there. Well, I don't know. And this 616 was just someone copied it as an error. We know that errors did get into later manuscripts. Right? Because again, the text does not say 666. That is the numerical value of these 3 Greek characters. Right? These 3 Greek characters here, that's their numerical value, but that's not what it's saying in our early manuscripts. Right? Look what Revelation 13:16. Let's look at it again. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. Revelation 13:16 to 18. Now, if we translate everything that we've learned about this, here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding decide the multitude of the beast, for it is the multitude of a man, and his multitude is identified by this symbol here. This word here, number, doesn't always necessarily mean a numerical number. It can also mean a multitude or a bunch of people, right? A number of people. It does not necessarily mean in Greek, this word number, a number 600 or 2 or 10. It can mean, go look in the lexicon yourself, a multitude, a large number of people, right? So if this theory is correct, now read Revelation 13:16 to 18. Here is wisdom. Let him who understanding decide The multitude of the beast. That's the people of the beast, the multitude that follow the beast. For it is the multitude of a man, a large group of people who follow a man, and his multitude, this people, is identified by this symbol in the name of Allah. Put on the forehead, put on the wrist. Now, doesn't that fit absolutely perfectly? It does. I'm not saying it's right, but I mean, come on, that is crazy that can fit like that. Here's Irenaeus, a early Greek person on 666, and what he basically says is that this 616 was an error. So we know that that was a copying error. That's the only reason I have that in there. You can go read that for yourself. And here's some examples here. Here are these symbols here written on current badges that go on your forehead or wrist. Here we have the Muslim symbol. Here we have what we have in our earliest Greek manuscripts. Again, it does not say that this is 666. It is 3 Greek letters, and you have to play the gematria game to make it into 666. And what this theory is stating is that John wrote this. The Greek guys didn't know what to do with it and made it into this, and that's how 666 got started. But all along, God was trying to identify the multitude of a man and the symbol of this multitude. And you can see here, people are wearing it on their foreheads and on their wrists already to this day in the name of Allah. Now this is kind of scribbled up, but it's right in here in the name of Allah. And even more interesting, remember I alluded to this very early in this talk when I talked about the end times theology, that there would be this beast, and the beast would come and mark the foreheads of believers, right? The beast in the end times theology of the Muslims says that this beast will mark the forehead of all believers to distinguish them from non-believers. So isn't it fascinating that Muslims are already taught to take the mark to be saved? The exact mark, if this is true, which would be the mark that condemns. Can you see how this could be a genius plot of Satan to pre-program billions of people that the mark, this creed to Allah, is something that saves you when it's actually what condemns you? What are the chances of that? I don't know, but they got to be slim. And let's look just a little further here. Look what it says in Revelation 22. It's talking about the final state of heaven and the kingdom on earth. And he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of God and of the Lamb. This is the final state, the final eternal state that God has for all of eternity. In the middle of its street and on either side of the river was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations, and there shall be no more curse, but the throne of God and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him. They shall see his face, and his name shall be on their foreheads. There shall be no night there, no need of a lamp or of the sun, for the Lord God gives them light, and they shall reign forever and ever. Now the point here is that the name of Jesus will be on their foreheads. And if Satan is a mimicker, if Satan is someone who wants to copy or steal what God's doing, isn't it interesting that in this theory, that if it's correct, that the Muslims would have the name of Allah on their foreheads as their saving mark, when God says that those who are forever Christians or ever saved have the name of Jesus in some form, right? Remember, it doesn't necessarily have to be the word Jesus on their foreheads. Do you see how that fits with the idea that this thing on the foreheads is a creed or a name of a person, not necessarily some kind of just number? So in summary for part 2, crescents are identified in the Bible with Satan and false gods. The Muslim religion beheads people, like in Revelation. Mecca is the great center of idolatry and anti-Yahweh Jesus religion on the planet. It is the greatest. There is nothing like it in any other religion. Mecca fits all of the clues for Revelation, Mystery Babylon, every single one of them. And the Muslim end times theology exactly matches the Bible, but the exact opposite. Muslims are already wearing an anti-God creed on their foreheads and wrists that matches what fits in Revelation with 666. And you have to ask yourself, what are the chances of all these things lining up? And then if you take part one with all of them lining up, I don't know, but it's got to be pretty small, guys. What are the odds? You ask yourself, you do your own homework, you come to your own conclusions, but whatever you believe about this whole Rome thing and European Union and all that, that's fine. I'm not saying you throw that out. People can argue that, but when you look at it, you've got to include some of this in whatever is going to happen. It's unmistakable. And if you look at what they've done with this Roman European theory, there's a lot of problems where they're rationalizing and making excuses for verses and dancing around this or that. And really, there's not much dancing or excuse making on this side to make. Everything fits so darn well that you don't have to start doing those gymnastics to make your theory work, which is usually a sign that it's closer to the truth. And I'll end here with this. This is actually a area that was lit back in 1971. It was a gas area, and they lit it on fire, and it has continued to burn ever since for almost 50 years, and it's called like hell on earth. So again, in Revelation it says that this area of Babylon could burn and smoke and everything ascend forever. Here you have something that's been on fire for 50 years. So this ends our Bible study. We did not go over Ezekiel 38 and 39. That we can do that. That would be another hour and a half talk in and of itself. If you guys want me to do that, I'll need you guys to email me and let me know you really want me to do it. I don't want to do it if 2 or 3 people are going to watch it and you guys are like, phew, I'm done. So email me, post it, let me know, hey, I want you to do that. And that way I'll know you've watched this and you want me to do the next one. I can do Ezekiel 38 and 39. But congratulations on finishing the Old Testament. It's a big accomplishment. It was worth our time. There's nothing more important than the Word because it is our spiritual food. It's our spiritual armor. Jesus himself is the Word, and by abiding in the Word, you will be now ready for the New Testament, which we will start in the fall. We will either be back in the church, which I think by that time with social distancing in the new building, we should be able to do that. Or worst case scenario, we will continue with the online format. So thank you for participating. It was a blessing. It was a pleasure, an honor to represent the Lord and his word, to serve you guys. Thank you for everyone's help. Thank you for coming. Thank you for paying attention. And God bless. Have a good night.